Hey there, it's the real Jason Duncan. I've got a special announcement for you really quick. I am hosting the Exit Lifestyle Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, February 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2022. You don't want to miss it. Go to theexitlifestyle.com to learn more.
I always say that fear has a favorite food. Its favorite food is time. So when you start feeling those emotions, if you allow some time to pass, it's going to feed. And it's going to grow big and overwhelm you, and then you'll stop and you don't move forward. So, and then maybe I'm studying of how to prepare for a big move. And then as I get closer in my preparedness, I get more fear. And then eventually it's like, oh, you wane. So I think on that trajectory to being really prepared and figuring out what you need to do for success, we do have to, we're human. We're going to feel the emotion of fear, but we have to learn how to manage it, take action quickly, and just trust, we'll acclimate. We're as prepared as we're going to be, but when we get to the other side, the rest will come.
Yeah, well, you and I both know that our ability to adapt will always outperform our ability to plan.
Yes.
To get ready for it. I mean, we've got to be prepared. Nobody can be successful without preparation, but you can't rely only on your preparation. Your ability to adapt will outperform that.
In today's ultra-competitive business world, being a successful entrepreneur or business owner can be very challenging. Fortunately, contemporary times have blessed us with resources for tackling those challenges and getting us to success more quickly than we could have imagined. Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs grow incredible companies. This podcast looks at the 5 keys to unlocking success as an entrepreneur. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason's mission is to use his gifts of teaching and leadership to help others get the results they want out of life. Join Jason every week and learn the keys to grow a truly successful business.
Well, welcome back to the show. This is The Root of All Success, as you know, and I'm the real Jason Duncan. And man, I've got a good guest for us today, like we do every week, of course, but this guy's special to me. He's had a big part of my life, played a big part in my development as an entrepreneur, and I'm excited to talk to him today and dig into maybe some stories that I don't know all the details to, and we're going to get there in just a second. But I want to say, before we get into the intro of our guest today, I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see we're actually at the Standard at the Smith House right here in the Rhino Room. And the Standard is a fantastic cigar club, private club here downtown Nashville. I'm privileged to be a member. It's owned and operated by the one and only Joshua Sterling Smith. This house is 18,000 square feet of Southern sophistication and style, and I love hosting shows here. So sometimes my guests and I drink a little bourbon like we're doing today, smoke a cigar. We're not doing that today, but we're gonna have a good time talking and just having a conversation about success. And that's what this show is really all about. And I wanna thank you for taking the time to learn about success and to listen. So whatever podcast player you're listening on, we're syndicated on the C-Suite Radio Network. I thank you to those guys for what they do and helping us get out there to more people. I'm asking you a favor. Please go and like the show, hit the subscribe button, and leave us a 5-star review if you think it's worth it. If you don't think it's worth it, send me an email. We'll talk about how I can make the show better for you. But my goal is to bring you high-quality guests and interesting stories that help you get to success. That's what the root of all success is all about. So let's go ahead and let me talk about today's guest, Dan Vega. Dan Vega is my guest today. Dan and I met a few years ago, I guess, 3 years ago, and we were introduced. There's some interesting ways how we got to know each other. I don't know that we'll get into how we met one another, but we're introduced to one another. And this guy has been he started his first business at the age of 19. He's been a consultant, a coach. He's been a talk show host. He's had 35 million viewers on a television talk show where he talked about business and entrepreneurship. He co-founded a book publishing company. He's been on the circuit as a seminar, running seminars. He's an investor. He's worked with tons of private investors, whether it's private equity, venture capital, angel investors, etc. The guy knows business, and he knows it really well. And what's interesting about Dan, and we're going to talk a little bit about this today on the show, is that he has this background in mathematics that is really unique, that not most people understand math the way that he understands math. And I'll ask him to tell a little bit about that story today. And what his thesis, his theory is that every problem, whether it's business, personal, life, whatever it is, can be reduced down to, and not reduced in the bad way, like it doesn't make any sense, but or that's trivial, but reduced down to math and hard variables. And if you can figure out the probability of success, you can get there. So we're going to talk about that today, and I know I left out a lot of cool other stories about Dan, and but he's a fantastic guy. He's a good friend of mine, has been instrumental, like I said, in helping me refocus my life as an entrepreneur, and I'm honored to welcome Dan Vega to the show today. Dan,
Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome to Nashville. Glad you're back.
And I love the Rhino Room, man. This is awesome.
This is a great place. Well, we used to record the shows for those that watch this on YouTube. There's a room around the corner called the Matador Room, and it's got a big table. You can seat 10 people around it. And I started recording there, but it was fine. But I went and recorded on site at a private hangar one time, and the only place to set up, they just had some comfortable couches and chairs set up in the hangar. And after I did that show, I'm like, we got to move. I can't sit in a chair anymore, like just at a table. I need to sit. So that's why we moved into here. So it's very comfortable.
Gosh, I have so many interesting friends. I'm in a hangar.
Well, it's much more glamorous on YouTube and in the podcast world. So Dan, you and I met a few years ago, and I called you after I was aware of who you were and said, hey man, I need some help with a specific issue. And you helped connect me to some people and to some ideas that really helped solve a big, major entrepreneurial problem I was having. So you've been doing that not just for people like me for a long time, but how did you get your first start as an entrepreneur at 19?
So both of my parents, I was raised in the LA area, and they never had a lot of financial success. And so after graduating high school, barely, we had family friends that lived in Florida, and I knew a guy. He was a friend of my father's that was 8th grade educated, multimillionaire, self-made guy, and I went down, visited him, and I said, "Hey, Victor, what am I going to do?" I tried 2 jobs for like 2 months, and I'm like, I don't think I'm cut out for this. And I actually, early on, I did have some really good mentors that wanted to take an interest in me and mentor me, but I wasn't sure exactly which direction to go. And he said, Dan, let me ask you a question. How much capital? Bubba, how much capital could you come up with? I said, I don't even, not a lot. I said, maybe $300. He said, get your hands on $300. Call me, I'm gonna show you how to start a business. So I started a business with $300 when I was 19, buying and selling used equipment, like for stripping floors and janitorial and vacuums, and started making really good money. And I was like, wow, that was my kind of taste as an entrepreneur.
And who was this guy?
This guy's name is Victor Stevens, still alive, lives right down the street from me. He's in his 80s. Very close friend of mine, kind of like really a father figure. And just an incredible guy. He started running ads in the newspapers and selling mattresses, and built a 20,000 square foot warehouse thing, and just a really smart entrepreneur, one of them, just rare breed.
How long did you run that particular business?
So I started running it the way he taught me, running it out of like storage sheds and running ads, and I was making 6 figures, and it was like, I think the minimum wage at the time was $3.33 an hour, something like that. And then I went into a storefront, ran that retail for a few years. I sold it when I was probably 21, and I had a really good contact that was selling medical equipment for like respiratory kind of stuff. So I have like 2 paths, because for the math thing that you mentioned earlier at the opener, I had these mentors that wanted to kind of take me down this lane, but also, I had this other real tangible businesses where I was making some money going this way, and I didn't know how to bridge those 2 things.
So when you got into the respiratory equipment, I think I've heard a story or 2 about some really cool sales that you made in the respiratory thing. Could you share one of those stories?
Yeah. So as I had these great mentors wanting to use my math skills, and they were big business guys, the 3rd or 4th guy that I worked with, he says, look, kid, you're in a really unique situation, because you're going to work with the most successful people in the world, with the biggest companies, and although you're in an NDA now, one day you won't be, and so you need to pay attention, you need to learn everything you can learn, But he says, the one thing you're not going to, he says, knowledge is very different from experience. Just knowing what they do and knowing, that's one thing, but you need experience. And he says, let me make a recommendation is you need to get in the people business. You need to learn people. That's the part you're not going to. So that kind of made sense to me of like, okay, so I can do this other thing while I'm learning, because being in direct sales and getting into medical, that's going to throw you into the fire as far as learning people. And so I figured it out. I've always been this guy as try to listen twice as much as I talk. I talk a lot, so that's a lot of listening. But so anyways, I just wanted to observe and keep my mouth shut and try to learn everything I can, ask a lot of questions. And started making $1 million a year pretty young. Like, this is awesome. I didn't have a lot of the financial training of, how to save money, invest, those things. But, when you're young, you're bulletproof and there's plenty of time, right?
Right.
And so moved around from different companies. A lot of the companies would offer me, free inventory. They'd give me, hey, you're really crushing it at this one place. We'll give you $150,000 worth of free inventory if you come aboard with us to sell. I was like, yeah. So I moved around a little bit, but
So
loved it.
where does the math come in? You've got a condition that makes you see numbers differently than other people. Talk about that.
Oh, so yeah. So since I was really young, I have a condition called synesthesia, and it's very similar to like a form of autism. Believe me, I'm a mess in many aspects of my life. I have people, but so there's a lot of drawbacks. But really, in short terms, what happens is your 5 senses kind of get crossed. So like some people can smell color or see music or, and it's very confusing. And like I said, there is some drawbacks, but sometimes what happens as a result is you have a high inertia towards certain things like music. So for me, I've always had a really good understanding of math since I was very young. And, when I was about 13, people started taking notice. Even though I was getting terrible grades in school, I wasn't applying myself. My home life was not great, so I didn't care. But because of that did open doors and led to some really great people wanting to take an interest in me, fortunately, and mentor me. But the way it works, if you want to know, and I don't talk about this a lot, so you're getting the exclusive. It's a little bit strange for me to talk about, but so when people talk in anything that has a foundation of mathematics, so whether it be business, marketing, music, most things have a foundation in math. While they're talking, I basically see like a landscape in my head that fills in. So, and every color represents a certain thing. So for instance, the number 10,000 looks kind of like a yellow fish, so kind of. So if I'm talking to an entrepreneur and he's talking about capture rate and we're going to get 1% of the market and here's how we're going to do it, while he's talking, I can see color filling in. And if there should be a break in the color, let's say gray area, I would stop him and say, that part right there, that's not going to work. If he says, well, what will work? I don't know the answer, right? It's not like Rain Man where it's like 587. Right? But I can manipulate the math and move it in different sequences until the color fills in. And I'll say that'll work. And it's just congruent. So when they break that kind of congruency, it means that the variables they've now introduced are not congruent with the stuff they've been telling me. And so anyways, that's an interesting thing. And as you know me as a friend, sometimes I have a habit of breaking eye contact where people are talking and I'm like this. It's kind of distracting because stuff's popping up. And as you know, my pet peeve, I don't like to drive a lot. I have a driver because while I'm driving, sometimes if I take in data and I'm looking at bill, it'll flash up almost, and I don't know where I am and I can't almost see, and it's very dangerous for people traveling with me. So a lot of times people with the type of synesthesia I have, they have problems.
So when did you notice though, so that's a condition or a situation you've been dealing with for a long time and you could see things that people can't see. But when did you realize that could be to your advantage as a business person, as an entrepreneur?
Well, I learned that it could be an advantage. I was very young, 13, 14. I could see how to move things. So we would have people coming over. This sounds really bad, but I'd have the neighbors coming over and doing my chores and this, and my mom would always joke with me about being this little kingpin of all these guys coming in. And I'm like, no, Mom, I'm not taking advantage of them. I'm making sure they get what they want, you know? So I would use it to where I would say, like, this person is out of congruency. There's no congruence here, and what do they need? And I would learn how to, every time the color's congruent, it's a good thing and there's a reward. And every time I'm operating in the gray, not in the gray area, but in the gray box, stuff doesn't work out. So I put it together very quickly, and I'd say by the time I was 19, people were wanting to work with me and hire me to build business plans, to build pitch decks for funding, and or even corporations when they were doing their masterminding for the next projections for the next year. Hey, come and make sure our variable's right. We don't have any, breaks in the chain, so to speak. So I was monetizing it, 19, 20. But
and you've had people notice that in you and say, I want you to come work on my team, which is kind of how you started getting notoriety. People wanted to talk to the Dan Vega. Like, how do I get in front of this
I think
guy?
by the time I was 20, I had a secretary so I'm running this direct sales stuff, trying to run, basically for all practical purposes, a franchise. And but then people would fly in and be like, hey, I'm from Silicon Valley. I got this company. Like, where's it broken? And they would pay me a rate. I would go through it wrong. Well, what's right? Leave it with me for an hour. And they would pick it up, and that was kind of the deal. So I did a lot of those, but it led to some really great mentors that taught me a lot, and they took an interest in me. I was very transparent with them. I said, look, how do I save money? Like, what should I do with the money? Like they knew I was a kid, and they gave me great advice. And about the 5th or 6th mentor, I met a guy that was, at the time, one of the Forbes 400. He was like the number 25 on the Forbes list. And me and him just kind of clicked, kind of filled a void, I think, for each other. And he became a great mentor and friend. So.
And that was one of your people to help you get propelled into the world of business. Now, you went from running businesses and doing direct sales and eventually into the seminar business. Talk about how that transition happened.
Well, I was always adamant about having a daily sales meeting. And if you've ever run those, and I know you have, it's a mixture of sales, but a lot of it's motivation, and you're getting everybody kind of together and getting them, emotionally kind of charged. And so I would have to do a lot of studying. I was young, so a lot of the people that worked for me were half my age. So I had to make sure I would go to, there was a little Books A Million by my house. And I would go over there and I would spend a couple hours every morning working up like a talk. And then I would go run my morning meeting at 10. And I did that for a long time. And that, was a condition to where I started getting a lot of content and laying down these meetings. And I remember one time this guy, I was probably mid-20s. The guy who worked for me was in his late 40s. And he was new. And I did this meeting and he says, look, I got to be honest with you. Originally when I found out you were the boss and you're half my age, kind of had a little bit of a problem. But after I've been sitting in your meetings, man, I am like honored to work for you. And, so I thought this could have a different life. This could grow a little farther. And some of my mentors, most of them were 3 times my age. So they were writing books, they were in the seminar business, they were investors. And so that became kind of a natural trajectory for me.
When did you do your first seminar where people paid to come listen to you talk?
Well, my first seminar I was forced to speak because this guy, Bill, he was very wealthy and obviously and very successful. We were at a very big event, probably 5,000 people, and he didn't tell me he was going to do this. I'm like his guy, I'm trying to learn and make sure he's got everything he needs. And he recruits the audience against me to come up on stage and speak. And I'm like, no.
No.
And so finally I get up there and he's got them, against me now. So I get up and I'm like, I don't know what to talk about. He goes, just here's a marker on a thing that he'll project in this stadium. And he's like, just do what you do with me in one of our sessions. Like, I'll give you a problem to solve. Like, just let's work on something. So Dan, and he presents a question, and I kind of lose my mind, and I get on there, and I'm just showing, kind of lose myself a little bit. I turn around, and the audience like crickets. Everybody's like, and that was kind of So I started getting asked, I think within maybe a couple of months, I started getting paid to speak. and
That's
do that.
great.
Yeah.
So Bill was the guy that
Oh, yeah.
said, "All right, I'm gonna sneak you up on stage against
Yeah.
your will."
I think afterwards I was almost throwing up. I was so, why did you do that to me? And so.
So then how long after that experience did you think, wow, there's a way to make money? And of course, obviously you're helping impact people and do positive change, but there's a way to really make a business out of this seminar thing. How long did it take for you to figure that out?
Not long. And as you mentioned, I think for people like yourself, and this, it's always about the impact. I wasn't learning from these guys and doing it to make money. I was making money with the first company, and I could always figure out how to calculate right and make profits. But it's about the impact and really doing something that is significant for others and being others focused and providing value. And as you know, and this just seemed like a way that I could do that. And, I was just giving what I learned from these great mentors, and, I guess some would say my gift as well. And people loved it, and it helped people. So very quickly I learned that this is probably the route I want to go. The part I didn't know is how to do it professionally. And I met a guy named Peter Lowell that he used to run a seminar thing called Get Motivated. And it's like the Super Bowl for business people. So it's like stadiums, and they have ex-presidents and all the Tony Robbins and Branson, all the biggest guys, and you go there for a day and you cheer on your favorite entrepreneur. And he ran it, and he gave me really good advice. He says, listen, everybody's in the seminar business. I mean, these are the guys I grew up reading their books, Zig Ziglar and Les Brown and they were all on the show. And I was like, this is crazy. He said, but 1% of the seminar business controls the other 99% of the seminar business. So what you have to learn is you have to learn the mathematical kind of equation to fill the room. He's like, if you could fill the room, you can share the stage with anybody you want, because that's the part no one wants to do. So that was great advice, because that's something that I really focused on. And then I would get guys that were $50,000 for a keynote, and I'd say, look, I don't have $50,000 to pay you, but I'll give you $2,000, and I'll make sure there's 1,500 people there. And they would say, okay, could I sell my stuff? So I got to start sharing the stage with these incredible people, because I kind of focused on that certain aspect of the seminar.
What was the one thing in all your seminars that was the most popular? What concept did you teach that everybody seemed to flock towards?
That's a great question, and it can get a little complex. I'll give you the very brief version, but Aristotle believed that any problem that people face, and of course he was mentoring Alexander the Great, which we see how much success he had at the time, basically conquering the known world. But he said, any problem that we face, there's a mathematical equation that if we can find the right equation and execute it, it would give us immediate remedy for whatever we're dealing with. And this includes most sickness and like whatever we're dealing with. And I know this to be true. So I think the main thing is anybody that has a really good work ethic and consistent, that they can execute, there's an equation for them. So you see a lot of people right now on social platforms, and they're selling these certain things, and it's like, if you want to be successful, follow this, right? And that's kind of through their purview, right? You got to get into real estate, or you got to get into that. And there's money made in all those fields, but that's what they did. And a lot of people can follow that, but it's difficult if you're not using their metrics. So what's possible is to do a quick interview with someone, figure out what their variables are, what their strengths, weaknesses, what their tools are, and then build a mathematical equation or strategy based on those variables. And then you need two endpoints, right? So how much money do I want to make? What time frame? And what field do you want to do it? And then from there, you can actually create an equation that will give you the action steps for them to be able to do it. And what I've seen over the last particularly 25 years, anybody can be wealthy in 60 months or less if you got the right math. Now you got to be able to execute it, but most of the time, if I wrote somebody, here's how to make 10 million in a year, and gave them the plan, they might not be able to follow it because it's going to require them to do things they can't do. But if I wrote it based on their variables, they've probably already executed all of those things that's going to be required, maybe just not in this particular sequence or order, but they know how to do each piece. So the probability for success is much more.
I know one of the things that you've taught me in working with me and as a consultant, when you worked with me and you were the consultant helping me, was this idea of probability of success. If you can isolate your probability of success, then you know which way to go.
Yeah.
And I think that sounds to me like what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, as we both kind of follow, I don't care much about what's possible because I think most things are possible, right? And I think both of us hang out with some guys that everything in their world is possible. If you said, hey, you need to be the first human to be able to fly without any apparatus, they'd be like, how much time do we got to figure? Like, nothing is impossible in their world. So I think most things are possible, but I don't care about what's possible. I think about probability rate. So if people invite me as an investor to come in and invest or to collaborate on a joint venture or whatever, it's unemotional for me. I have a very fixed probability rate, and I calculate what is the probable outcome of this before I put any time or investment. Even my time, I won't do it. Now, if it's leaning towards a fairly high probability rate, then I'm all in. But if it's like, hey, there's a 2% chance probability rate that this will work, I'm out, regardless of how sexy it is or how attractive they make the offer. I won't bet on that, even if it's with me. You know what I mean? So I really follow the probability of things.
So you did the seminar business, and you talked about the probability of success and how the metrics and the variables can be aligned to get you more quickly towards success. When did you move out of the seminar business into investor, coach, consultant? When did that happen?
So while I was in the seminar business, naturally you start coaching, right? And or vice versa. If you become a coach, as you know, you start speaking, right? They just go hand in hand. People that see you at the seminars, they want you to coach them. And so that was kind of a, simultaneous. I started doing that as much as I could. But, and of course I started doing some investing as well, because you got to make sure your money's making money and not dying in an account somewhere. But in 2011, so I was on a full-time tour, and we were organized. We were 2 cities a week, 45 weeks a year. I mean, every week, doing 2 seminars, and I was gone 5 days a week. And at the time, my son was 3 years old. So I knew I was on a ticking clock of like, I don't know how much longer I can be away, And I thought this is a season that probably needs to come to an end so I can be home as a father. And I went to Africa on a tour, and I had a weird situation there.
I know the situation. I'll let you tell it if you want to.
So when I got back, I said, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I had an opportunity. I had mentored a young man that was like 30 years old, 29 years old. He had aspirations to start a book publishing company. And I basically made him a deal. I said, look, give me a year as an assistant. Be my assistant. Give me a year to educate you and teach you some stuff. And then I'll back you financially, whatever you want to do. Well, he had aspirations of being a book publisher, very brilliant young guy. And the year was about up. So when I got back from Africa, I said, this is probably time to make that transition. So that was in 2011. Kind of came off the road.
Are you committed at that point full time to run the book publishing, or were there other things you were doing simultaneously?
I told the guy, I said, look, we don't know book publishing as anything, but you know how entrepreneurship is. I said, look, I'll keep the doors open. You got to learn publishing, man. So try to find some mentors. I mean, that's always the key, right? Find great mentors quickly. Find great mentor, maybe Random House, McGraw-Hill, Simon Schuster, whatever. Let's learn this thing. Let's fail fast and take this curve, and then I'll keep the doors open. And he was great with people. He built some great relationships. And basically what I said is, I'll put 20 hours in, and I'm going to let you kind of run the helm. And I'm always a phone call away, but you're going to be the managing partner. And I had an opportunity as well at the time to throw my hat and do a little bit of television stuff. And that sounded like a nice thing that would keep me in that one spot to raise a kid, and something I kind of wanted to explore.
And that was Tuesdays with Dan, and you did that on ABC as a business talk show. That is really curious to me, and you and I have never spoke about your TV show. Yeah. But I want to know, how did that opportunity present itself?
So when I was doing a lot of seminars, and so we had like 5 or 6 regions in the country, and we would go into those regions and build audience, right? And so Southern California, being that I was raised there, that was a big hub for us. I was doing a seminar in Orange County, California, and I was just doing what I do, math-based kind of stuff. And this guy came up to me after the seminar and he said, dude, you got to be on television, man. There's a guy named Donnie Deutsch with the big idea, I think CNBC. He's like, he just went off the air. You got to get on television. And I work for the networks, on that deal. Everybody in Hollywood is with the networks, so you don't know what's right or not. But this guy actually did work with the networks for NBC. And I went in, I had a meeting at the time, and they did offer me a show, like a late night show. I think it was like after Dave Letterman, or, it was late night, interviewing like entrepreneurs and celebrities. And the deal would have kept me in Los Angeles, and we had decided to move to the Midwest for a while so my mom could be near her. We knew we were having kids, and LA is hard with children sometimes. So anyways, we passed on the deal, but it did plant a seed in my head. So now I'm meeting these great entrepreneurs like yourself. I'm like, God, that guy would have been a great guest on my show, And so when I got into the area I was going, ABC said, we'd give you a deal. We can't start you nationally like what they were going to do, but we'll start you regionally in 3-4 states. And if the ratings are good, we'll expand it nationwide. And so that's kind of what happened.
So that's really interesting. You
Yeah.
turned down first opportunity because of location. Location didn't make sense.
And timing of the seasons of the things I had already promised.
Seasons are so important to us. Now, then you eventually did start the show, and you're doing Tuesdays with Dan, which eventually became the Dan Vega show. Yeah. How many years did you do the show?
I did 6 seasons.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, this is a really, and I love what you're doing, and you're doing it exactly the right way. I had to learn all this. I didn't know anything about media. But when I went in and met with ABC, they were really excited to talk to me. They did like this little test thing. They were like, man, so tell us about your show. So I go in with all these executives. They're like, tell us about your show. I don't have a show. I have an idea from a previous thing I turned down. So I'm like, picture this. I'm just talking. And they're like, we love it. So is the show more like this or more like that? I'm like, it's kind of like that, but not really. Like, I don't have a show. So by the time we left there, they said, look, it's great, and we're going to figure out a small salary, and you come into the studio, and we're going to film the show. And I'm basically a paid host. And that's something occurred to me is like when you watch these late night television shows, even the ones that have huge, big audiences, they're a salaried host, but they don't own the content or any of the intellectual property, nor do they control who's going to be on their platform or what the platform's going to be used for. And that's not great for entrepreneurs. So I'm like, I don't like that. I need to own the content. I want to do my own show. And they said, well, you can't do that. And they had just finished telling me 98% of television fails the first season. And then they said, well, the only way you could own your own intellectual property, if you build your own studio, you're going to have to get your own team. It's a large investment. So I leveraged what they had told me against. I said, well, you told me 98% of television fails the first season anyways. So I'm willing to take the risk. Probably not even going to make it, but I'll go ahead and build. I need to own the content. Because I had background in the seminar business, I could stack the deck. I knew a lot of, very successful people with a following. So I was able to get those first 10 interviews, which are so crucial. And then, of course, we made it in ratings, and we expanded the show from there.
And you had 35, 40 million people listening to the show or watching the show.
Yeah, eventually we had, I think actually at one time, we got up around 50 million viewers, and all of the markets couldn't have it under Tuesdays with Dan because some of the markets couldn't play it on Tuesdays. They would play it on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
So they said, look, you're 3/4 of the way there, but if you want it nationwide, you're going to have to change the name because we can't guarantee that it's going to air on Tuesdays. So that's why we had the name change. We did the last 2 seasons, I think, under the Dan Vega.
And why did you stop filming the show?
Again, it was, so this was in 2016. And I was a little bit tired, to be honest with you. I had interviewed pretty much at the time, who I wanted to interview. And we filmed in front of a live studio audience. So there was like 150 people every filming. And that's a big component itself, organizing that. And the biggest reason was the bureaucracy with a major network. For instance, I had one of these kids that from American Idol, and he was talking about the golden ticket and the thing, the whole experience of it. And I wanted to, so I'm interviewing this, we did this episode on young millionaires and how they got their start, and he was one of the young people. And so I wanted to do a throw out while I was interviewing him to him being on the show and say, take a look at this kind of a thing. And it was like 6 weeks of trying to get permission just to use a 30-second clip. And everything started to become very hard, and there was all these rigid rules. It just wasn't fun anymore. And so I thought, well, I had an opportunity at the time to write for another television show. They had a 1-season, 12-episode commitment of a show, and I had never done anything like that before. I thought, let me put the show on hiatus, and then I'm going to do this other thing, and I'm going to think about my next move. And then when I got back to it, I started realizing, the big networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, they were really starting to lose their grip. Now, mind you, it's 2016, so this was before, you didn't have all these streaming platforms. But at the time, I could see the writing on the wall that things like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and Roku, they were becoming the titans. And the other people were kind of losing the grip. So I thought, if we come back on the air, we're probably going to go streaming. And that's what we did for a little bit.
And you've got a studio, you've got a television, I don't know what you call it, a streaming network now, Blue TV?
Yeah, Blue TV. And I occasionally will, if I see somebody that I really just got to interview, I'll do an occasional thing, and we have our own platform, and we have about 25 original shows, and we have maybe 50 other type things. It's still in the works, honestly. But it's fun, and we get out to a great audience. We can own our property, our content, and I can do it. It's not so rigid. I can do it when I want, but I don't have to follow so many rules.
So you've got a lot going on now where you spend a lot of your time doing investing. You're looking at deals all the time as an investor, accredited investor. But you do a little bit of coaching, not as much as you used to do, a little bit of coaching consulting. What's the most exciting thing you're doing right now? Like, what gets your juices flowing that you really enjoy?
So I don't do a lot of coaching anymore. I do it for a few clients just because it's fun. And so I coach a couple of NFL guys. I coach a lady that owns a sports team and a CEO that's a friend. So I do it enough to keep my finger on the pulse, and it's fun, The investing stuff is, you have to do it, right? You want to make a certain return on your money, and I look at money as, obviously it's a tool, but I look at it as like, you don't have to feed them. They're not cranky. They work 24/7. There's no laws, labor laws. Like, I want those to go out there and multiply and work hard for me and make a lot of babies. And so the investor thing, though, I have a great partner. I think in the last 12 months, we've invested in about 36 companies. So 3 a month is pretty aggressive. But it's very cut and dried decision. What's the rate of probability? Here's the numbers. What is it? Yes or no? Yes or no. And it's just, so it's not a passion, but we're successful at it. But I think right now, where I really spend a lot of my time is just mentoring others. I don't have a personal objective anymore of trying to make any more money or trying to gain more personal influence. I really just want to help others get the shot that I did. I was this young guy, cocky, that thought he knew way more than he actually knew. And somebody gave me a shot and said, hey, let me teach you the right stuff. So I always remember that, and I want to do that. And so for the last several years, I've really just been focused on mentoring and helping others. And I love that. That's really what gets me out of bed.
Well, I can see that in you because I know you personally, and I know what you do for people like me. And you helped, I hired you and an associate of yours to come in and do some investigative consulting work. That's the way I called it, in my business a few years back, 3 years ago, and really kind of reset the trajectory of what I wanted to accomplish. And so I can see that that's where the glisten and the gleam in your eye comes in, as spending that time doing the mentoring. Well, let me ask you this. So I ask every guest this question. It's about success. After all, the name of the show is The Root of All Success. You, from all indications on this side of the couch, looking at you, it's like you're a successful guy. You've made a lot of money. You've made a lot of impact. Had a lot of cool experiences, and you've met a lot of neat people. But how do you define that term, success?
As I'm sure we both agree, I mean, there's a lot of terms, and there's a lot of variables that go into, I guess, encompassing the term. But for me, it's about balance. You know, I think for me, success encompasses 5 or 6 things. So I don't preach at others what I believe, but personally, my faith comes number 1 for me. Family, you know, sometimes you just got to walk away from a deal. It's not, right? It might be financially lucrative, but you might not have the time. You have other things happening. I think financial independence is one thing, one aspect of it, certainly. But I think a couple that, you know, giving back, right? Impact. I think a couple that people really forget, one of them is just joy. You know, we might find the metrics of how to, you know, make a lot of money and still, and maybe not get a divorce and still go to church on Sundays. But if we wake up every morning like, what time is it? Oh God, like we're just grinding and we hate it. That's not really success either. So, and I think the older I get, this one is becoming much higher on that balance of like, you know, at the end of the day, I want to be a good person. I try to maintain a high moral code. As you know, I'm not perfect, but try to do the best I can. But at the end of the day, I just want to do a lot of really, really cool stuff with people that I care about. I want to be happy. You know what I mean? I want to do some really great stuff with people around me that I really love. Not just family and friends, but just new relationships, people that get it. You know, you told me a story this morning of a young man, we think worked for Amazon or whatever, and he's like, how do I get a house like this? And the passion, I could see when you were telling me, it's just like, oh, dude, like that's the kind of people we want to find.
Yeah.
And that's what I live for. So that's a big part of success for me, is just impacting others and having some joy in my life at this time.
So with that as the background for the definition, do you consider yourself to be successful?
I do. You know, I think that people comment on this all the time, and I take it as a great compliment. But they say, man, you're always laughing. You know, every time I think about you, you're like cracking up. I think I'm a pretty jovial, happy person overall. And, you know, not that I don't have my share of problems in business or challenges or family dynamics, but overall I roll with things. And I think my outlook, as you know, the mindset is a huge part of it. But I'm very happy. And even the things that a lot of people would deem mistakes that people make, man, those were such great learning things for me to look at the data and say, oh man, I'll never do that again, laugh it off and move to the next thing and not stay stuck in the past. So I think I'm successful and certainly very happy.
Well, I would vouch for that. You are jovial. Jovial is a good word. That's a good word. Jovial is a good word. I've got this theory, and I talk about it on the show almost every episode, that there are these 5 keys that unlock success for successful people. And the reason the way that I came up with these is after interviewing casually dozens of interviews, just over a cigar, a glass of bourbon, or a meal here at the club or other places. And I started asking, well, how did you become successful? And I started paying attention over the years of how those answers all seem to line up, even though they use different vocabulary. And what I discovered through that process is there are these 5 things that show up in everybody's story without fail. And I believe that they are the 5 keys to success. So I've heard your story now.
I want to hear them, man. I'm dying here.
I want to go through these with you, and you can tell me where, if at all, these keys appear to your story. The first key is that of passion. Like if you are going to be successful at anything, especially in entrepreneurship, passion is absolutely essential. And what I mean by passion, before I ask you how it appeared in your story, what I mean by passion is that most people think about passion in terms of the emotional side, where I love it, I'm excited about it, it gives me energy. And that's certainly a part of passion and is an indicator towards success, but isn't a key. Because I believe it's the other side of passion. It's the mental side of passion. It's the passion, the word actually means willing to endure. Like the Passion of the Christ was not about that he was excited to go to the cross. It was that he was willing to endure for a greater cause. And I find that entrepreneurs who are tremendously successful like you, they are passionate mentally. They are willing and able to endure. Do you see that as a key to your success? And if so, how?
No question, man. I talk about this all the time, and I'm so glad that that you mentioned this to your guests, because everybody thinks about the other side of passion. Like, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. I get it. We all know that. And that's something you should try to figure out, is how to monetize what you love. But what I also know to be true for sure is whatever your passion is, if I were to rate that on a scale from 1 to 10, let's say, man, I love photography, and I could tell this guy's a 10. That number also translates very directly to their amount of physical energy and drive, but also their wherewithal to withstand pain and discomfort. And honestly, as you know, as a business person, we're constantly stretching, and it's uncomfortable. I think one of the greatest attributes to an entrepreneur is to become somewhat comfortable with discomfort, right? And honestly, if you don't have the passion, you can't stay in the fire. So I kind of think of a guy that's a blacksmith, right? So he's pounding and pounding, and it's hot and it's terrible. He's pounding, and he gets a fairly sharp edge, and he cools it and he raises it out of the fire. And that's where I get a lot of people where they become moderately successful. They cool down and they're up here now. But the only way to get even a sharper edge is what? You got to go back. You got to be lowered again, back into the hard. You got to take a pounding. You got to take that heat again. And they're like, I've been there. I don't like it. I don't want to go back down. They almost think like, this is regressing. I'm already here. But you have to go back in it to get more refinement, if you want to elevate to the next level. And passion is the only key that I found that will allow yourself, a successful guy like yourself, to stay in the fire and get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? Without that passion, there's no way it's going to work.
So I'm glad to hear you agree, and I knew that you would. The second key to success that I've seen in everybody's life as an entrepreneur who's been successful is being at the right place at the right time. That every entrepreneur can look back and go, yeah, if I hadn't have been here at this time, at this juncture, there was this timing and this place that worked out perfectly. And it could be just in time of era. Like Elon Musk could not be as successful with an electric car company in any other era than right now. So that's one place, time, success key. But what about for you? What do you look back in your story, Dan, and say, this was kind of a right place, right time for me. Had I not been there, it wouldn't have worked?
It's an interesting question, because there's a couple sides to this. You have some people that are like, there's no luck, you create your own luck. Years ago, this was, not years, 2009 maybe, Donald Trump told me, he says, I got to tell you, man, a huge part of success is luck. He's like, I've just been at the right place, right time. At that time, I didn't know if I believed it. I was like, I don't know, you create your own luck. But there is times in my career I can honestly say I was at the right place at the right time. Now, sometimes you got to recognize it. And for me, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs will agree with this, usually it's when I have those big whopping failure. I do something and it didn't work, right? And I'm now in this situation where I'm gleaning and I'm trying to look at the metrics. Where do the wheels fall off? Why? It's usually from something like that I collect the right data, and then it sets me up for my next big win. And I think a lot of that is recognizing the timing of things. Sometimes people give up 5 minutes before the miracle happens. And for me, most of the big wins that I've had probably came off of that whopping failure right after that. And I was able to get the data. So timing is a huge thing. I certainly believe, I met my wife, as you may or may not know, by running an ad in the newspaper. Not a mail order, right? But she worked for one of my companies. You know what I mean? I kind of think, if I didn't run that ad, gosh. So sometimes you get a little bit lucky.
Yeah, well, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Take a lot of shots, you're going to get a lot luckier.
Yeah, well, putting yourself in positions where you're in places, like the reason that you and I are members of organizations and clubs that we're members of is because we know that if we put ourselves in those places, eventually something cool is going to happen. Success is going to come on the back end of that. Well, the third key to success, you got passion, right place, right time, is knowing the right people. And you already talked about two people in particular Victor.
Yeah,
and
Victor.
is it Bill or
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, Bill. Victor and Bill. So do you agree that knowing those people were people that helped get you to unlock success?
I don't know where I would be without those contacts and many others. I remember, so part of my success, I think, is I'm so stubborn. I will just keep going full force at a wall, thinking like eventually mathematically the probability I'll break it. I just keep, like the definition of insanity, I'll just keep hitting it, thinking I'm going to get a different result. And I remember Bill saying, he didn't want to help me because to help me, he couldn't stand to watch it. He goes, Dan, I watch you do this thing over and over and over, expecting a different result. It's crazy. Can I just please tell you how to get around this and like actually achieve what you're trying? Because I can't bear to watch this anymore. Like it wasn't for me, it was for him. He's like, and what I learned is that stuff that would take me, like obstacles that were in our way, which happens to all of us, that would take me months or even a couple of years to get around, they could pick up a phone call or just show me a little thing that I can get right around it in a matter of days or weeks. And when I saw that firsthand a few times, I'm like, I got to really start getting in the right circles and meeting the right people. You know, I hate when people say it's not what you know, it's who you know, because as we both know, you got to know some stuff. There is a lot to learn, and most people are not successful because they don't have the right type of education. They're missing some dots, and they need to hire people like yourself to get the dots, right? We know that. But the higher you get in business, the higher you get in success, it becomes more about those contacts and who you know and who you collaborate with. And I think also, as you know, aligning yourself with those people, not just to align with you in business, but when it comes to morals and ethics, people that you feel evenly yoked with. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I don't want to be tied to somebody long-term in a business if I don't feel like we're evenly yoked. But certainly those relationships are key.
Well, I think it's interesting that you talk about the what you know and who you know, because the fourth key is preparation, which is the what. It's, are you prepared for the success in the industry or the venture that you're attempting? And your preparation, I look back, and as I heard your story, I was trying to pick out, well, where did he get prepared for success to become the multimillionaire and the consultant and the TV host and all? Like, how did that happen? Well, the preparation was early on in your life. You were prepared because you had this mental ability to see math in a different way. That was preparation. And then you sold those cleaning goods and things, and then you sold the respiration equipment. All of that prepared you, because had you not been able to do that, Bill, was it Bill that put you in the front of the people in the seminar?
Yeah.
You know, that was a preparation point about what you know. So preparation, I believe, is one of the huge keys. You can't be successful if you're not prepared for it.
Yeah, and don't you think too, it's like, I was talking to my assistant about this morning, about, you know, and I think it fits hand in hand with preparation, is managing fear well. Everybody has this emotion of fear. There's stuff on a daily basis I have trepidation about, but I just go through it. And then it allows me to continue to be prepared, to prepare for something. But sometimes when I'm preparing for a certain task and I start feeling that emotion of fear or trepidation, you know, I always say that fear has a favorite food. Its favorite food is time. So when you start feeling those emotions, if you allow some time to pass, it's going to feed and it's going to grow big and overwhelm you, and then you'll stop and you don't move forward. So, and then maybe I'm studying of how to prepare for a big move, and then as I get closer in my preparedness, I get more fear, and then eventually it's like, oh, you wane. So I think on that trajectory to being really prepared and figuring out what you need to do for success, we do have to, you know, we're human. We're going to feel the emotion of fear, but we have to learn how to manage it, take action quickly, and just trust, like, we'll acclimate. We're as prepared as we're going to be, but when we get to the other side, the rest will come.
Yeah. Well, you and I both know that our ability to adapt will always outperform our ability to plan.
Yes.
You know, to get ready for it. I mean, we've got to be prepared. Nobody can be successful without preparation, but you can't rely only on your preparation. Your ability to adapt will outperform that. Well, the fifth P is plan, and the reason I use the word plan is that it's P. It starts with a P, and I needed an alliteration. You got passion, place, people, preparation, and plan. And by plan, what I'm actually referring to, and I'm really interested in digging into your concept on this, is that plan is not a written business plan. A lot of people think that's what I mean, and there are certainly millionaires and billionaires who never had a written business plan, so that's not the thing I'm talking about, although it could help. What I mean is the plan is, what is your plan to obtain and deploy the financial resources required to do your thing? Nobody can be successful with that. It requires financial resources. You're an investor now. You invested in 36 companies in the last year. You see a lot of people who come in with plans to get money. Some succeed, some don't. How does plan, in terms of financial plan, play into success in your opinion?
Honestly, it's everything, especially when you're seeking to raise capital. This is something I have to deal with, unfortunately, many times a week, every single week. You know, almost on a daily basis, people are sending me emails and pitch decks, and they're trying to get money. And after they don't achieve it over several years, we start to get into this belief system that raising capital or getting funding is difficult. Like, there's not a lot of people, you know, COVID, there's not a lot of people. That is not true, man. There are so many, you know, in my circles, the number one conversation that we have with other investors is deal flow. They're like, dude, you got a lot of deal flow I could look at. I need some stuff to spend money. I need stuff to put money on the street so I can make money and I don't have to have my income tied to active hours income. So we're all looking for deal flow. And doesn't matter what your idea is, for every pot, there's a lid. I've seen some stuff that I'm like, there's no way that guy's gonna get funding, gets funding, okay? And the reason why is because he has the right plan and he does the right work. So the number one thing to getting, let's just say capital, is that you have to get the right perspective. A lot of times, I'd say that's the number one thing, is we'll have a perspective from an entrepreneur, let's say, saying, okay, the investor, he's gonna wanna see this, and he's gonna wanna do that, and he's gonna wanna see this. So from his perspective, he's perceiving what the investor wants to see and wants to do, and then what I probably need to present. And that is the wrong perspective. The right perspective would try to get the investor's perspective, say, look, if I just inherited $50 million, then I'm gonna cut bait with 10 million of it, you know, 20% of my cash. What would I need to see, or what would I need to be told to be able to, for me to do that? And getting that right perspective. So to answer that is the right plan. They're gonna wanna see certain things, but it's really the approach. And so here's the number one tip for actually acquiring funding would be reach out to the investor and do not send them a pitch deck or ask them, I'm the CEO of a company like this and I was wondering if you have any interest in investing. That's crazy. The other thing would be, hey, Jason, I know you're also an investor and I would love to just build a friendship and learn a little bit about your metrics and what type of deals that you like and what type of terms that you prefer. And that's it. And then when he says, I like equity deals, or I like debt loans, or I like a mixture of both, I like a convertible note, and here's the lanes I kind of invest in, and I kind of know what he's looking. And then I ask permission. I say, look, just as one fellow entrepreneur to another, I would never disrespect you and your time by sending you something unsolicited. But if I find things that fit in this lane that you play in and that are vetted, could I send them to you? And they're like, oh yeah. Now it's asking, okay, what do you need to see from me? He's gonna tell you a plan of like, this is what you need. And then you gotta go do the work. You gotta put a real plan together to present. But he's telling you, these are my keys personally. Everybody skips that part and just sends them a pitch deck. It's like just throwing a ball trying to hit something, and that's the wrong way. So plan is crucial, particularly in getting capital.
So I appreciate your perspective on that for lots of reasons, but you see in your story that passion and right place, right time, and people and preparation and plan all played, and I know that that happens in everybody's story. And what's funny about that is that if you're an entrepreneur looking to succeed, just look at those keys. Like, what's your passion level? What's your ability to withstand pain and discomfort for the thing you're trying to build? If it's low, you need to quit. It's not going to work. Go find something else. Right place, right time. Well, if you're spending all your time sitting in the office working on your deal, you're not at the right place. That's not the right place and the right time.
Yeah.
Who do you know? Are you involved in organizations? Are you accepting invitations to be part of things? Are you going to events? What about preparation? What are you reading? Are you watching YouTube videos, or are you spending all your time scrolling through TikTok? I mean, what are you preparing to be successful at? Yeah. And then I love what you said about money. Like, there is no shortage of money. There is no shortage of capital. This is a true story. So I was recently looking at purchasing a motorcycle dealership because I love motorcycles. And my wife, of course, she's not the entrepreneur. I'm the entrepreneur. So we were talking about this. She goes, "Well, how are we gonna get the capital to do that?" I said, "That is not the problem. The problem is finding the right dealership to buy." And so when I found one that I thought ultimately it wasn't, but when I found this is the one, I made one phone call, literally one call, and I hung up the call. I'm like, "The money's ready. We can do it. We can do this right now if we want to." And now, ultimately, that ended up not being the right deal.
Sure.
But money is not the problem.
Oh, man.
There's so much money out there to get.
Oh my gosh. Like I said, every conversation I'm having with friends, they're like, "Dan, you got a lot of deal flow. We're looking for qualified deal flow. If we don't look at a lot of great stuff, we can't, our money's not making money." So there is no shortage of cash. And right now, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but there's thousands of people in the US becoming millionaires every day. We've been buffaloed believing that, everybody's hurting with COVID. Certainly there's some industries out there, let's say, with what's happening in the world, that they're at a halt, and I get it. But man, I was talking to a young lady last night. She's like, since COVID, it was like gasoline. We just took off, right? So you do have to make pivots in time. Same thing with '08, right? You got to make pivots, and hopefully you pivot correctly. But they don't burn the money when the economy goes down or some world event happens. It just shifts, and you gotta shift with it. But it's out there for sure.
Well, you actually the one that told me the analogy of the balloon and the money. Talk about that. I love that analogy, and especially for those watching this on YouTube, they can see your illustration that you.
Yeah, when I used to do the summers, I would actually bring a balloon, and then I would make a duck or a bicycle for you at the end. No, but I would show them, at that time, especially like '08, '09, everybody had their business set up a certain way, and then the money shifted, right? So I always think about, there's a lot of speculation on this of how the U.S. is broken up, but I think really there's two groups. You got 97% of Americans in one boat, and you got 3% of Americans in another boat, right? And there's a range of that. So the 97 Americans, let's say roughly close to 300 million people, whatever it is, they're in a range from somewhere of can't make ends meet, can't keep food on the table, to drive a nice car, Lexus, Beamer, Mercedes, whatever, take a heck of a nice vacation a couple times a year. Other than that, no real savings, right? Somewhere, like, they're making it at best. And then you have 3%, which are at least asset-rich millionaires, right? And then you got the 1%, right, that has all the wealth. So the economy, what happens is the air constantly shifts between these two groups. So if there's a balloon and I grab it here, all the air is going to go over here. If I grab it over here, all the air goes over here. Same amount of air, it just keeps shifting to the other side of wherever the pressure is applied. So if you think about something like, the 80s, for the most part, there was a brief recession, I think, in '83. But then overall, it was considered the decade of excess, right? And so whoever the masses, whatever the loudest voice is, dictates what everybody believes. So when you have 97% of people saying the economy's great, that's what's going to be the media. We have a great economy. The 3%ers, they're making money, but it's not their heydays, okay? Then when you have a down economy like an '08 or COVID happens, all that money now, there's pressure applied here, and it all moves to this little tiny group. The same amount of volume, over 97%, moves to this little tiny group. And the masses are saying what? Terrible economy, we're in a recession, you can't hire good people, all these things. The other people over here are saying, dude, how long is this gonna last? It's like, right, they're buying everything half off, and right? And so I always think about it, and you have to play both sides. So sometimes I have companies set up because the market is dictated to the 97%, and I got a catcher's mitt, and I've created systems. But when the economy shifts and the air moves, I don't sit there saying, I'm going to wait for it to come back and keep feeding a thing, waiting for the air to come back. That's what happened in the Great Depression, is the air moved. And everybody waited and hoarded and hunkered down, and they misjudged the timeline, and it was like traumatic. They had like forms of PTSD. They became hoarders after that because it was traumatic. And so instead of waiting for the air to come back, depleting all your money, is, hey, the air just shifted. I need to stop this, and I need to go set up a different mechanism on this side. So chances are, if you think about an event like a 2008, in 2007, whatever you were doing, probably is not what you would want to do after September of '08, right? You need to build a different mechanism. And so you look at these companies, even these great big brands with these big names that go out of business. And it's like they were waiting and just bleeding until the air shift. And it doesn't sometimes.
Well, I love what you said. The air shifting in the balloon is a great visual because I'm a visual learner. But you also said they didn't burn the money. I think that's such a great, the money's still there.
It's out there. If anything, they're printing more of it. But it's now, so I think of like LA, New York. If you've ever, I'm from Los Angeles, it's so spread out. You fly in, there's just lights any direction forever. You go to New York, it's all the same amount of people, but it's in a really small, it's really crowded, right? And so I think about it like that, like when the money's spread out over this big area, you know what I mean? The general tone will be it's a good economy. But then you get that much air, that much volume to shift into this little tiny city or this little area. It's like you can't throw your net fast enough. You know what I mean? You can't put enough. And I know you've probably experienced this as well, as it's not that there's no money out there or money to be made. We're just trying to pick how we want to do it. Like I'm saying no to things all the time that I could make money on. I'm like, there's too many ways. I have to pick the way I'm going to do it.
That's great.
Right? It's crazy.
So I want to ask this question as we kind of land the show and land this conversation. There are a lot of people who listen to this show that are very successful entrepreneurs that eclipse your success, my success combined. And then there's entrepreneurs that are on the other end of the spectrum that are just starting or haven't yet started. I want to ask you, as a very successful entrepreneur, a business coach, talk show host, someone who understands money and numbers, what would you say to that on the first front end of the spectrum of entrepreneurship? What's your advice to him or her?
A couple of things. One thing is, you do have to get into something that you're passionate about. Because like we were talking about, if you're not a 9 or a 10 on that passion scale, you will never withstand the pain that it's going to take and the heat to get through the startup phase. It's just, you're going to take too many bloody noses, too many knockdowns, and you're not going to want to get up. So if your passion is a 5 or a 6, you got to go find something else because you're just not going to make it. The other thing that I'll say is separating your vision and your strategy. And we've talked about this before. People will have this vision of what they want to happen, and they'll kind of lock it down and say, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Then they'll start a strategy and they'll say, okay, as best as I could get right now, this is what I think I should do. And they're naive thinking that this strategy is going to fully accomplish the vision. And that will never happen, right? So when the strategy, there's going to be elements that work, and then the wheels are going to come off and it's not going to work. And then they're second guessing the vision, saying, oh man, I thought this was going to work. I thought this was the one that was going to work. They may relaunch it one more time and say, and then they either start scaling back the vision, well, even if we do half of that, or they just lose entirely and they go create a new vision. You have to keep the visions and the strategy separate. Once you have great vision, lock that stuff down, stay fixed. But then know when you're going into the strategy, it's on the 5th or 6th or 7th refinement of the vision that it's finally going to pop, and then it's going to, or excuse me, the strategy, and then it's going to accomplish the vision. So I know when I launch the strategy, even people around will say, you know, that's not going to work, right? I know, I can't wait to launch it and see what happens. Like, it's the best I have right now. It's probably not going to work fully, but I want the data, figure out what did, what didn't, and then I'm going to put it back together, refine, tweak, move, push it back out there. And then on 5 or 6 refinements of the strategy, then it actually does accomplish the vision. And we just have to know that going in. So I think keeping that strategy and vision separate is a key, because there's an evolution when it comes to our strategy.
I love that, because I know I teach that a lot to the clients that I work with as entrepreneurs, and they misunderstand and misconstrue the vision strategy and think that when the vision's not being accomplished, they just need to change it to get a new vision. So I think that's very, very good advice.
Or that affects them so deeply, like personal self-worth, like, I'm a failure, man. I'm like, no, this is the process, and it's actually working for you.
Yeah.
Stick with it.
And you learn more from failure than you do success.
Yeah, for
that
sure.
Failure's a much better teacher. Well, Dan, I really appreciate you being here, coming to Nashville to be on the show. I understand you had a very long drive yesterday, because getting here took twice as long as you thought.
Yes.
Appreciate you coming in. How would people get in touch with you if they say, hey, I like this guy, I want to reach out and find a little bit more about him? How would they get in touch with you?
It's a great question.
I know you stay under the radar, so you may say, you can't.
You know, that's a really funny thing, and you know me about. So when people think about influence, they think about social influence. I want to be connected to a lot of people. I like to be have some anonymity. I like to be behind the scenes. LinkedIn, probably you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. If people pitch me on stuff if people want to be my friend and they say, hey, I love what I saw on Jason Duncan show, I'd love to connect, I'll connect. I'm a friendly guy. I want to get into it. But LinkedIn's probably the best way.
Yeah, so Dan Vega, it's Vega.
Yep.
So Dan, thank you for being here. It's been an honor to have you on the show. I really am glad. I know we were scheduled to do this in San Diego a few months ago, and then you got sick, I got sick, neither one of us were able to make it, and it was a tragedy for all of us. But here we are today in Nashville.
I'm in the Rhino room, man. It worked out.
That's right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure, man. Really appreciate it. And hey, congrats on all the success you're having on your show.
Thank you.
And with your business.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Another successful entrepreneur verifying these 5 keys. They happen every time. And as you now know, listening to Dan's story and every other story you've listened to on the show, these keys unlock the doors of success. All you got to do is use them. Where's your passion level? Are you putting yourself in the right place at the right time? Who are you rubbing elbows with? And are you prepared? Are you learning the things that you need to know to be successful in that venture? And what's your plan to get the money? We have and we could probably do 10 shows just on money, how to get it, how to deploy it. Money is out there. Do not use the excuse that I can't get capital. All you have is a lack of creativity, not lack of capital. So make sure that you listen. Go back and listen to the show again. Dan gave some really good nuggets of information there. I would like to say this to you as we close out the show today. One of the things that I do is that I help entrepreneurs figure out how to get out of the daily weeds of running a business, to exit without exiting, which is what I call it. So if you're interested in understanding how you can live your ideal life now as an entrepreneur, as opposed to waiting until you sell or exit at some point in the future, what if you could have that option today? Well, that's what I do with entrepreneurs every single day. I run a cohort program called the Exit Accelerator, and I take 12 entrepreneurs just like you through 12 weeks of the curriculum that I used and developed through my exit of a multi-million-dollar business to live my ideal life now, where I can go ride motorcycles for a week, and I can go travel with my wife, and I can get in my RV and go wherever I want to go, when I want to do it, and spend time doing the things like this, doing the show. If you want to get to that ideal life, go to exitwithoutexiting.com. That's exitwithoutexiting.com. Sign up for the next cohort, get in there, what I tell people is give me 24 hours and I'll change your life. Because once you understand that there's this third option, you don't have to stay, you don't have to sell, but there's a third way to do this. You can own it, get all the financial benefits, all the tax benefits, and you don't have to be there every day running it. That is where the ideal life actually shows up. So go to exitwithoutexiting.com. Well, until next time on The Root of All Success, when we talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur, I'm the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we invite you to visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Take charge of your business. Grow it from great to incredible. Join us again next time here on The Root of All Success.